Okay, preparing for med school, I want to make a few videos on this and also talking about how to structure your responses. I think structure is really important so you're able to convey your message and the interviewer is able to follow you, as well as just how you respond and how you engage with the interviewer. I think is really important in terms of like being friendly and personable and coming across empathetic. So I'm going to go into, I did a bunch of mock interviews with BeMo prior to my last interview, and I want to kind of go over the structure format for how you can respond to questions like policy questions or scenario questions, because I think having a structure to guide you is helpful, especially when in the moment it's really hard to sometimes even follow a structure when you are stressed. So just having these kind of guidelines or roadmaps to go through. Starting with, I think the first thing you should do every single station is introduce yourself and then like ask like, who do I have the pleasure of speaking with today, and thank them for being there both before and after. And then, so for example, if we're going to go into a policy question, this is kind of the structure that BeMo suggests you follow and I try to follow. So first, kind of give an overall understanding of the policy, and then go into the pros, and then go into the cons, and then overall kind of give your response on what your stance is, whether you support it or you don't support it, and then possibly give some solutions or alterations to the policy to make it better so that like minimizes the cons that you had to your point. And then similarly for a scenario-based question, you could do similar intro, kind of brief background on the scenario, and then you could have 3 if-then. So if this happened, I would do this. And you can go like best to worst scenario, and then go into how you would, like what you'd learn from that, how you'd apply that to future scenarios, and overall, like just kind of the summary. It's really good to recap at the end of each station, I think, so that way if you're talking for 3 minutes, they can follow and they know like your final stance on something. One thing that I forgot to include, sorry, is gathering more info. So when like for the policy or the scenario, once you kind of give an overall understanding of what this policy is or what's happening in the scenario, then you could say that you're going to gather information. I also think it's really helpful if you just give the interviewer a roadmap. So you say, okay, I'm going to talk about 3 cons and 3 pros, and then overall give some solutions or suggestions that I have to this policy. I think that's a really good way for them to follow, so they know what you're going to say. Same with if you're talking about, like, anytime you're listing something, like what I like to do, if I'm going to list 3 things at the start, I like to list like this, and then I go into it, so that way they know exactly what I'm going to talk about and they can follow easily. As an example, if I were to talk to the barriers in rural health, I would say, I think that these are the 3 barriers, and then I would go into them one by one, and then I would offer some solutions to those barriers. One tip that I actually got yesterday from a med student I prepped with that was really helpful is in your time that you have to reflect and read the prompt, what he actually did in his interviews was he spent that time thinking about how he was going to structure it, and then in the moment, like the ideas are going to flow, so that way you know exactly how you want to structure your response. So I'm going to try to implement that as well, just because all the ideas I'm thinking of during my time, like I have those in my head anyways. So I think structure is one thing that's really like just important to figure out how you are going to deliver what you're saying during the interview. BeMo has a free consultation you can do that I'm going to link in my link tree, and I used to have a 5% discount code, but they just increased it to 10%. If any of you are interested in doing interview prep with them, the discount code is BRIN10, which I'll also just add to the link so you can remember it. I'm going to do a few more mock interviews with them. I think doing a mock interview, whether it's with BeMo or with a friend or someone you know, is important just so you can really practice the structure, because each school is going to be different in terms of how long you have to read the prompt and answer the prompt, and overall just get familiar with the format. And also just the more you practice, the less stressed you'll be on interview day. I also try to add in a personal example to every single prompt. I think that makes it more personable, and also I'm able to apply like what I learned and how it's applicable to this and how I would deal with this in future. I think it's also a great way to add things that you want the interviewer to know about yourself or experiences that you had. Like anytime if I'm going to talk about rural health, I'll add in a personal experience, or working with Indigenous patients, I'll add in my personal experience, and I think it just elevates it and also just adds more depth to my response. So if there's any time that you can add something to recase like who you are, that's also really great. Just as an example, if I was going to talk to some solutions to barriers accessing healthcare in rural communities, I could then relate it to how my master's I designed an online health portal to connect patients who are in rural areas, seek access to care, and have access to a provider. So I would connect like that's a solution, and it's how I've already worked towards that solution. So I'm also adding my own personal experience.